Hey everyone, welcome back to CryptoCache. Thanks for joining me here. We got a big one today. Super important update regarding CME futures, back-end data here, specifically with liquidation and dominance. But the most important thing, of course, is just reiterating and reaffirming these Fed rate decisions here tomorrow, as well as some big tech earnings. So these are going to be hitting pretty hard. This is, of course, slated for tomorrow for Microsoft, Meta, and Google. So important stuff to recognize, and obviously some outliers here too on the order block, some things we really want to pay attention to. So be sure to stick around. We got a good one today. All right, folks, before we jump into the back-end data, let's go ahead and quickly reaffirm the importance of always liking the videos and commenting below if you get a chance. Deeply appreciate you doing that. Thank you again so much for being a phenomenal part of my life. Don't forget to enable alerts and make sure that you are staying on top of those things. Now, just to quickly touch on the fundamentals here, the important things here are as follows. Fed rate decision tomorrow. As per usual, we're going to see 2 p.m. There's going to be basically 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to get those news, or basically the results there. And then 2:30, Powell comes up and gives a speech and just totally destroys the market. He could actually contribute positively, but as of late, hasn't been that great. And then, of course, we got the big tech earnings. We've already touched on that, but all three of those companies, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Meta, are going to provide their earnings. A lot of their earnings are probably looking pretty decent, considering they're all AI driven. The last thing, of course, probably the most important, and I was able to look this up specifically what time it is. It's the Trump Z summit here, basically, where Trump is going to speak with the president of China about tariffs, and that is essentially 8 p.m. Wednesday Eastern Standard Time, effectively Thursday morning in South Korea. So just kind of some heads up on that. We're seeing the time frame tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Fundamental catalyst at 2 p.m. for the Fed rate decision, 2:30 for the conference, and then of course I think it's 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the big tech earnings here as well. Okay, so just some time frames to be mindful of. Maybe consider staying out of the market during those times because those are all fundamental catalysts in a lot of ways, just based on the fact that it's going to push the price action of Bitcoin in different directions. Now, speaking of which, we've got some pretty large buy orders here, specifically at 116,000, so we can see that heavily guarded on the order blocks. And then once more locally, 114.5K with some larger orders here locally. So folks are trying to buy this dip here, all right? Now, it's not a significant dip, but it's a dip nonetheless. Taking a look here at the last 24 hours, we can see there's a pretty big gap between liquidation of upper and lower because the price just wicked up and wicked down really quick. Went to 116 to 114 and back up again. So it's kind of that standard manipulation. Now, there's possibilities that it's something to do with this gentleman here. Of course, James Wynn, he's causing a lot of problems usually in the market where there's liquidation hunts to try to target him. I'm not saying that's exactly the case, of course, but there's a lot of reasons why this has that this is something to do with it, right? So there's just it kind of speaks to the whole manipulative market that we're in. Anyways, let's go and jump back into liquidation. To clarify, once again, the local liquidation has been fully swept within last couple thousand to the upside and downside. But once more, 116.3K and above has a lot of liquidation. So there's a chance that we see the price continue higher based on that metric there. That's more so the macro liquidation. Okay, so that's looking good there in that regard. Let's go ahead and take a quick look here at the back-end data for Bitcoin, kind of just see where we're at. On the right-hand side is open interest. We've talked about this previously, but once more, 113.5K is that local area. We actually saw the price action wick down to that level here, and we see the price action bouncing off that range. Okay, that's exactly why we had to take profit target in that level. So if you're not familiar with this, Bitcoin, we took 22% in 12 hours because we averaged into a position, or actually we didn't average in, we just got in at 115. The 116 never got filled, and we got out at 113.7. And if you saw my video from yesterday, you'll know that that was a heavy area of confluence. There was a lot of liquidation there. There's also the open interest just below where the price bounced. Okay. Now, it's never an exact science. It doesn't always work out this way, but that's generally construed as a kind of a support level here for us so far, that 113.5K. Now, looking here at liquidation. As far as delta is concerned, it's kind of jumping up and down. And if we do kind of take a quick look here at the last 3 days liquidation, we're kind of in that middle of that range. Once more local liquidation got hit upside and downside. Let's actually look at the last 7 days, see if there's anything left here, just to get a better perspective. I know we already kind of looked at this, but this helps us kind of see where we're at. And generally speaking, there's a big chunk once more at 116.5, but based on the order block, there's a lot of sell pressure at 116. So that level of 116 is kind of somewhat of a resistance range based on a lot of protection in that environment. All right, now take a look here. Not the 4 day, sorry, it was a 4 hour. Let's look at the daily time frame first and just kind of work our way down here for Bitcoin and just recognize quite simply that we are kind of in this interesting range right now, right? Where we're testing the 50-day SMA. We're also overextended with a 9 on TD sequential, letting us know that we've been moving approximately in the same direction for 9 days straight. You could probably argue it's only been about 5 days because we had this period of consolidation, this 4 day fight or battle at 108,000. But generally speaking, we're moderately overextended and we're reaching into a resistance range, but we're over 50 on the RSI and MACD is converging. These are more positive signs than negative, right? And the concept here, once more, we zoom out, we look at our point of control, 111,000 is that range there where we have the most amount of support. So support below the price, a little bit of resistance above based on volume, but more so overextension and a continuation progression higher. Most of these things kind of combine together to give us a slightly better, more advantageous potential further upside here for us. So I'm not proposing we're going to go straight up, but I can tell you we're mostly bullish here in the overall sense because once more on the lower time frames, you can see we're still establishing higher lows and higher highs as well, right? It's a nice little channel. You could argue this is like a broadening type of wedge pattern here where the price action could break down. That's absolutely true. So we do want to pay attention to our our short-term ascending trend line, but at this point, there's not a whole heck of a lot of signs here telling us we're just going to rip right back down. The pullback that I talked about yesterday has already happened. That's essentially it. Now, does that mean you just take longs moving forward? Probably not. I think that this week is a bad week to consider trading a lot or over trading, as discussed already, right? We've talked about the fundamental catalyst coming in the next 24 hours. We're going to see a pretty different market in 2 days from now, all right? So between now and then, maybe consider, omitting your risk and lowering your risk, right? But hypothetically, the price does pull back. I would say 111 should be the immediate bottom based on that macro point of control and also the local point of control. It's also the local high here before it broke this range and hasn't been retested yet. So in most cases, you do generally see the price work its way back down to those previous high ranges before it continues further up. But you could also argue that our local high here was retested and the price is going to take off from here too. So it really depends on how you are and what your thoughts are. So what I mean by that is what kind of trader are you? Do you want to average in now as the price pulls back? Or do you want to go all in at this level? It's probably a bad idea to do so either way. I think waiting on the sidelines for that 111, 112K range may be a better consideration. Even if that ship sails, who cares? You know you made the right choice, right? That's kind of the concept. I'm not saying right now taking along is a bad idea. It's just not necessarily the most recommended, even though we're still in a nice little convergence type of situation. So the easy way to understand it is a macro structure here for Bitcoin and even the lower timeframes are indicating further upside. We just have these ridiculous fundamental catalysts happening in the next 24 to 48 hours. If they happen to be disadvantageous, then we're probably going to go down. Obviously, the inverse applies as well if they're looking good. So those are the kind of my thoughts. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? Let's take a look at some altcoins next. All right, folks, let's go ahead and start off here with Ethereum as per usual, kind of see where we're at, getting a baseline on the backend data first, just kind of see where things are lining up here. And to clarify with Ethereum, we've talked about this previously, a retracement of the 4050 to 3950 makes sense considering there's that CME gap below the price. But furthermore as well, just a general, poor pairing with Bitcoin. It's Ethereum is pulling back a little harder than Bitcoin is. Now, once more, it doesn't mean it's going to drop to the ground floor. It just implies for the moment we're seeing that imbalance there. And we can identify that by looking at a few different things, but specifically CME futures, we're seeing this lower range here. And then of course, if we take a look at Ethereum dominance too, we can also recognize that ETH dominance is coming back and Bitcoin dominance is increasing, right? Meanwhile, altcoin dominance is increasing too in the last 12 hours. So, or sorry, no correction, that's not the last 12 hours. That's actually basically the last 9 days because this is a 3-day time frame. So the overall sentiment here is that we are seeing altcoins doing pretty well overall, but Ethereum is lagging behind, right? So it's just kind of an important indicator to understand. It doesn't mean you want to short this coin per se, but it does imply that it's moderately weak to that stand. Now, when we take a look here at Ethereum, liquidation long delta is still bullish, right? So it does imply taking a short right now is kind of inherently more risky. When we look at the open interest here, or sorry, the liquidation left-hand side, let's go ahead and get a refresh. We can see there's a chunk of liquidation as low as 4,000. So that's that standard support level, that psychological support or resistance, depending on what side you're on there. So just be mindful, 4,000 is inevitably working as a magnet. And that's this area right down here. So hypothetically, the price pulls back a bit further. That's where we might see. Now, When I take a look at the daily time frame of this coin, we want to understand once more 4,300 is that point of control. So we do progress higher and we happen to see the price continue a bit further up. 4,300, 4,350, that upper range there between its 0.618 fib level and that current level, that basically that macro point of control is going to give us the indication that we're going to see some slowing pressure or some selling pressure if we hit that range. So I'm just psychologically, I'm kind of thinking in my mind here, 4,300 is a good place to consider shorting. All right, that's a tentative thought process for me, as is 4,000 as a nice tentative long consideration too. Once more, there's liquidation as low as 39.50 we identified yesterday on the macro timeframes. And in general here, I think that slightly further consideration to the downside would make sense if Bitcoin pulls back. Bitcoin doesn't pull back, I think we're going to slow crawl up moving forward. The reason why I say that is just because, again, it's not really a great pairing here with Bitcoin. When we take a look here, of course, at the open interest, or more so importantly, rather, we already looked at that, the RSI. We're over 50 in the RSI, which is fantastic. Money flow index is increasing and MACD is converging. You got to keep in mind, folks, all altcoins that I look at here, specifically the top 10 coins that we're kind of more so interested in, those coins are all looking pretty much the same structure, right? So don't get too out of yourself. Don't think that Ethereum is just going to go to the metaphorical moon because of that, but it does increase the odds of success or further upside, right? All the more reason why it's more inherently risky to take a short right now. You're better off waiting for a long that doesn't happen than taking a short to that range with increasing your risk, right? That's kind of the concept. But the 4-hour time frame does tell us we're kind of rejecting out in this local area here of 4150. That's kind of the local point of control. Ever since we've been in the month of October, as a rough estimate, last 30 days, we see the most amount of volume at 4150. So that's an interested area. We can see a MACD divergence, stochastic swinging down. Haven't lost 50 on the RSI yet. So we're breaking bearish, but haven't fully done so yet. So I think if we're going to pull back here once more, I'm more interested in a upper 3950 range to the low 4000 range as a long versus taking something of that sort right now. I think it's just a bad idea, especially if you kind of compare this coin here with Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. This is the 1-hour time frame. As you can see, Ethereum is establishing lower highs and lower lows, where Bitcoin isn't, right? It's almost the opposite. So what happens if Bitcoin were to pull back? I think Ethereum would pull back a lot harder. So just be aware that ETH is not a strong consideration for a long just yet. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community. And the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, folks, let's go ahead and move on to Solana, see what's going on. We'll just start with the backend data here really quick, get a baseline. And generally what I like to look for when I look at the backend data is, of course, open interest support ranges. We can kind of see once more 190 to 195 is that heavy concentration. So whether or not you're going to short to that level or take it long at that level, just know there's a lot of support there. So be very careful and make sure you manage your trades effectively. We can see liquidation short delta is effectively at 2 billion in the green, basically implying we got way more longs than shorts. So it's not necessarily a great idea to consider shorting right now, but is it too early to long? That's kind of the question that I get. Well, from a liquidation standpoint, there's still a lot more left to the downside, and based on the next 24 hours being highly volatile, it's probably best not to trade this coin. But in general, we could very well see a sweep to the downside if Bitcoin runs to 111,000. So we see 111 for Bitcoin. You bet your butt 195 to 200, or sorry, 185 to 190 is that area of consideration for Solana. Now, looking at the pairing here, kind of seeing how Solana is performing versus Bitcoin, not so good. It's pulling back really hard versus Bitcoin, and while it increases with it, the sell-off appears to be much stronger. So I don't really like to see that kind of pairing when I trade a coin. But when we look at the macro structure here, just like I discussed previously with Ethereum, we're looking at a pretty strong consideration here, breaking 50 in the RSI, money flow index increasing, stochastic swinging up, MACD converging. There's some positivity here on the macro structure. Okay, just know closing above 205 would be a much better consideration for a long versus trying to take a long into a resistance. So once more, macro structure 204. I'm rounding up 205, but it's more like 203. That is that solid resistance range for us. Taking a look at the 4-hour though, this is where we start to see some cracks in the glass. We're starting to see stochastic and MACD diverging, as well as testing that 50 range on the RSI. So these are just early signs of reversal, kind of letting us know that potential downside makes more sense, right? Once more, The overall structure here is still pretty decent, but considering we haven't broken above this 205 level, it's highly guarded. Leads me to believe that we're more likely to pull back a little bit. But you could also argue too here that we are in a type of cup and handle pattern where the price action is essentially working itself into a descending channel. And this descending channel does typically flag out, right? So oftentimes you see something like this happen when it comes to, the price action pulling back in this current state. So once more, all this is fundamentally driven based on tomorrow's events. So be very, very careful with that. But my expectation is that Solana will continue to pull back a little bit further, and depending on what happens with the news, it'll respond accordingly, right? But just know for the moment, we're not seeing a strong pairing with Bitcoin, so I wouldn't expect monumental upside unless Bitcoin really starts to rip, okay? All that said, short-term correction down lower makes a little bit more sense to me. What are your thoughts? Comment below. All right, let's look at SUI next. This one does have a cup and handle pattern a little bit more, so we were able to identify that earlier, a little cleaner of a pattern. But once more, patterns mean very little. In case you're not familiar and you haven't been watching my channel for a while, patterns are more so, they're similar to Elliott Wave, only a little better. And what I mean by that is they're more predictive indicators, kind of letting you know, that momentum is shifting, and it's kind of a good heads up on key level supports and resistances. But unless you kind of use that with confluence, they mean very little, right? So it's kind of like a pipe dream or some kind of placebo effect, and you want to be careful attaching yourself to that, right? Some people take trades solely based on that one thing, and they get absolutely hammered. They're pretty much the same kind of caliber person that's taking breakout trades in a bearish environment, right? You don't want to do that. So anyways, hindsight's 2020, right? I get it. I'm not trying to fault you if you are into that kind of stuff. Just know that, adding areas of confluence or, more confirming factors makes sense. And that's what we do in this channel here. We basically just identify specific areas of interest and make sure that we're not taking trades without caution, right? You want to do your due diligence. All that said, tons of open interest below the price, reinforcing support for this coin. Can it pull back? Yes. Will it pull back? Probably. But it's still mostly bullish, and I'll explain more so about that as far as what I mean. At least yesterday it was, right? Now at this point though, to clarify, 255 to 250 is kind of that support range. So in a perfect world, Bitcoin pulls back to 112 to 111, SUI hits 250, and then we take a long position. That's kind of my general thought. But once more, let's double check a few things, because 245 is at macro support. Liquidation long delta is at 100 million. It's down from 200 million yesterday, but it's still in the green, right? And if we take a look here, we want to refresh this guy. Last 7 days, we're seeing, liquidation pockets above and below, but nothing super close. There's a little bit left at 250. We can zoom into the last 3 days and see if there's any kind of local liquidation here. And we can recognize that there are, we're some about 252 and then upwards of 272. So in a perfect world, once again, we see a wick down to 250, take a long from there, and Bob's your uncle. It just moves on up, right? The inverse could apply too, though, where the price shoots up to 275 and rejects and comes back down. So let's go ahead and identify some key levels here first. Quickly to note, SUI chart looks very similar to Solana chart as far as its progression down, with Bitcoin having trouble continuing to maintain higher highs and higher lows. So what does all that mean for us? Well, let's take a look here. It's a daily time frame and see if there's any outliers here. Now, first of all, the macro structure for this coin is pretty terrible as far as how hard it's been beaten down. But it's also positive too if you consider it, because there's a pretty solid double bottom here forming, whereas 245 is kind of that bottom, right? So we shouldn't see much further than 245. We only had like a 1 day close below that level here, right? All that said, everything else looks moderately bullish from a momentum standpoint. MACD's converging, stochastic swinging up, but we still have yet to reclaim 50 in the RSI. So what I'm kind of proposing here is that 50 on the RSI is a pretty solid resistance for us, therefore kind of reinforcing that resistance at $3. And basically the easy way to identify this here, or what I mean by that, is our previous low of roughly 311 is going to be the new high for us. So if we end up running towards that level, there's a distinct probability we slow down there. But between now and then, if all we had to do is literally break this current range of 267, and we'll be off to the races. So I do really still think that this coin has more propensity to go higher based on those things there in the structure, even though the macro structure is quite poor, and we're not seeing a significantly positive correlation between Bitcoin and SUI. We are seeing this nice little cup and handle pattern. And the reason why the cup and handle pattern here again is beneficial is because it's establishing higher lows. That's the first step. Second step is it's consistently retesting this local high, right? And that's why cup and handle patterns do break out, because of the way that they progress. It's more of a psychological component, because the selling pressure at 267 is slowly subsiding as you continue to retest. So the more you push something, the more you kick something, the more you try to beat a door down, the more likely it is to break eventually, right? And that's kind of what's going on right now. Keep knocking on that door, 267, the price may inevitably break. So while SUI isn't like monumentally strong right now or amazing, I really like this lower time frame pattern combined with the macro structure and that gap between the current price of 267 or 260 rather, upwards of 305 to 311. So I like what I see here overall. I think this coin has more propensity to go higher, but obviously would I love to see an entry at 350? Totally, but that may not happen, right? That ship could sail. So anyways, those are my thoughts here on this coin. Well, it's never perfect. It is what it is, right? Let's take a look at XRP next. So XRP. This coin is performing a lot better than expected. And what I mean by that, the short-term correction hasn't happened yet. Now, I do personally feel if Bitcoin were to pull back, we're going to see the same thing for XRP. But if you do compare these two coins, XRP is one of the few outliers that is establishing higher highs and higher lows. Now, you could also argue that this is a type of pattern that in most cases does tend to break down, just based on the simple fact that it's a broadening wedge pattern here, essentially deriving from the upside. Oftentimes they can reverse themselves. But once more, we're establishing higher lows, and this higher low pattern is super beneficial, indicating that every time the price comes down, it continues to establish lower highs, or higher lows rather, and that's letting us know that the buyers are more interested in buying these dips. Okay, so from a psychological component, this coin looks fairly strong. Let's double check the backend data. And see, we can see open interest looking pretty heavy at between 260 and 265. Secondary to that is that low 255 to 250 range. When we look at liquidation delta, it's maintaining at 700 million here, has been for the last 2 or 3 days. So that's a very, very strong sign implying that bulls are in control. And here's that macro resistance level. Keep in mind, the reason why I feel comfortable holding a short position open with this coin is because there's so much resistance between 270 and 275. I'll show you in the charts here what I mean by that, but the best way to describe it is that there's always going to be liquidation occurring at local highs, which we're seeing here, but also just above or below the previous all-time ranges. And what I mean by that, let's take a quick look here. Go ahead and zoom out to the 3-day or the 1-day time frame. We can see here there's multiple lows here, attempts before the price broke. Okay, therefore those are going to be, we're going to need to see multiple attempts before that breaks moving forward. Okay, now outside of all the ridiculous and stupid, terrible idiots here out there that are promoting XRP, they don't know a darn thing about trading. They just simply copy and paste everything else that everyone else says. There's no way this coin is going to go to 400 or 1,000. Like I'll be more than happy to eat my words when that happens. The main reason why is because people don't understand market capitalization or dominance. And the truth is, it would take trillions and trillions of dollars flowing into XRP to do that. Meanwhile, what I mean by that here, and the reason why that's not relevant and not super important, is be careful who you listen to and be careful who you watch, because those people they're simply monetized by promoting that content, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I like to monetize my product as well and sell my signals, but from the grand picture here, this level of 270 to 275, it's not going to be broken right away. We're already overextended leading into it. We're at a 9 NT sequential, lower time frame. We have multiple lower time frame convergences letting us know that while we have good bullish momentum, the likelihood of rejecting this area is becoming more and more, it's becoming greater. You just also got to recognize too, though, and this is contradictory, the price action is working itself into a nice bullish type of rectangle pattern as well. So these do oftentimes break to the upside. I'm just expecting a short-term break of 270, sweep that liquidation and pulling back. That's kind of what I'm thinking now if we continue to maintain this range. So if Bitcoin pumps here soon, I think XRP will pump again. But it's going to be a short-term pump that'll likely be corrected, and I think we're still due to see this low 250 range. Okay. Once more, the local high hasn't been retested as a new low yet. So those are my thoughts. What are yours? Comment below. And hopefully I didn't, hurt you or insult you by saying that this coin's not going to go to some ridiculous number. I'm just going to always tell you how it is, and the realisticness here is that this coin Sure, it has good potential. Most coins do in a lot of ways, but it's important to be realistic when you're trading. That's all. So try not to be a pipe dream person and smoking the same stuff or drinking everyone's Kool-Aid, because it's not cool, right? Anyways, hope you all learned something today. Thanks again for being an amazing part of my life. Don't forget to like videos, comment below, take advantage of our exclusive offer here with Bitunix too, folks. I forgot to mention this, but awesome campaign right now until November 22nd. Easy reward bonus and just super easy volume bonus if you're a consistent trader. Okay, so check it out. It's good stuff. We'll look forward to seeing the next one. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.